I made a viral post about my wife's affair that even her coworkers saw. I never imagined that one impulsive moment could unravel the life I thought I knew. It started like any other ordinary day, an uneventful morning routine, a lukewarm cup of coffee, and the slow realization that something in my marriage had quietly begun to shift. My wife, Emily, had always been my partner in every sense. We had built a life together that, at least on the surface, looked picture perfect. But beneath that facade, small cracks had begun to appear. It was around the time when I started noticing little inconsistencies. Late nights at the office that weren't mentioned, sudden changes in her routine, and hushed phone conversations that ended abruptly as soon as I entered the room. My heart clenched with worry every time I pieced these subtle clues together. For months, I tried to tell myself that I was overthinking things, that stress and exhaustion were clouding my judgment. But deep inside, I felt a gnawing certainty that something was terribly wrong. One chilly autumn evening, I found myself scrolling mindlessly through social media, seeking distraction from the constant undercurrent of doubt. That's when it hit me, a post that combined humor, heartbreak, and a touch of poetic justice. I crafted a satirical tweet that hinted at my suspicions and frustrations without naming names, something like, "When your spouse suddenly becomes a mystery novel with too many red herrings." #feeling betrayed. It was half cathartic venting, half sardonic commentary on modern relationships. I didn't expect much, maybe just a few likes from sympathetic strangers. The post spread like wildfire. Within hours, it went viral, shared on every platform, commented on by strangers who had their own tales of betrayal, and even picked up by a few local news outlets. The irony was palpable. A private agony turned public spectacle, a digital confession that resonated with countless others. I was simultaneously overwhelmed by the support and the humiliation of being forced into the role of the broken-hearted ex. But then, the unthinkable happened. As the post circulated far and wide, the anonymity of the digital realm began to erode. Friends and colleagues started reaching out with concerned messages, and it wasn't long before someone from Emily's office contacted me directly. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine as I realized that the post had reached its most unintended audience yet, her coworkers. Suddenly, my personal pain was no longer confined to a closed circle of trusted friends. It was a topic of office gossip, a viral sensation that could affect not just our private lives but her professional reputation as well. I was caught in a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. Part of me felt vindicated, that I had finally shed light on the deception that had undermined our marriage. Yet, another part was filled with guilt and regret, wondering if this public airing of private grievances was the right path to take. Every notification, every comment was a reminder that my personal turmoil had spilled over into the lives of others. I never intended for her colleagues to be part of this. It felt like a betrayal not just to her but to the sanctity of our once private world. Late that night, I sat alone in the dark, staring at the glowing screen, pondering the irreversible consequences of my actions. The room was silent except for the distant hum of the city, a stark contrast to the chaotic chatter of my online interactions. I recalled the early days of our marriage, the quiet confidence we once shared, and wondered how everything had led to this moment. Was it the slow accumulation of unspoken resentments, or had I finally reached the breaking point of my tolerance? In the solitude of that moment, I realized that the post, while a raw expression of my pain, had morphed into something much larger, a catalyst for change, for confrontation, and for painful truths. It wasn't just about my broken heart anymore. It had become a mirror reflecting the complexities of modern relationships in the age of social media, where every personal grievance could be amplified, judged, and dissected by a global audience. The morning after the post went viral, I woke up to a storm of notifications, messages from concerned friends, strangers offering advice, and even angry texts from people I barely knew. But the most jarring alerts came from my own phone, Emily's phone, filled with missed calls and a string of messages that I couldn't bring myself to open. My stomach churned as I tried to process the chaos that had erupted overnight. By mid-morning, the situation escalated further. I received an unexpected call from a mutual friend, Lisa, whose voice trembled with urgency. "I don't know how else to say this," she began hesitantly, "but your post, it's everywhere. And Emily, she's not happy at all." Lisa explained that whispers had already become loud conversations among Emily's coworkers. Apparently, her office had become a battleground of opinions, rumors, and even outright confrontations. The realization hit me hard. My digital outburst had shattered the sanctuary of our private life and spilled into her professional world. Within hours, my email inbox was inundated with messages from people seeking clarification, some asking for details, others offering moral support. The situation was spiraling out of control. I knew that every new notification was a reminder that the repercussions of my actions were far more extensive than I'd ever imagined. Instead of a discreet catharsis, I'd unleashed a digital wildfire that now threatened to engulf us both. At work, I felt the weight of judgmental stares and hushed conversations. I'd always been known as the quiet, unassuming type, a man who kept his personal affairs far from the public eye. But now, colleagues approached me with a mix of sympathy and curiosity. "Is it true what you posted?" someone asked, their eyes searching mine for a confession or perhaps a sign of regret. I found myself trapped between the urge to explain and the fear that any explanation might only deepen the wounds. The boundaries between personal and professional had blurred, leaving me exposed in a way that was both painful and irrevocable. Emily's reaction, however, was the most devastating blow. Later that afternoon, as I sat in a small cafe trying to gather my thoughts, my phone buzzed with a message from her. It was brief, but every word stung. "We need to talk now." The terse invitation to confront our unraveling marriage left me paralyzed with anxiety. I knew that this conversation would mark the point of no return, an irreversible confrontation of secrets and betrayals that had festered for far too long. I spent the rest of the day in a haze of remorse and apprehension. I replayed every moment leading up to that post, questioning whether my actions had been driven by the desire for validation, or simply by an unbearable need to express my anguish. Every notification, every headline, every whispered rumor at work reminded me that there was no escaping the fallout. The post had morphed from a personal confession into a public spectacle. A spectacle that had not only exposed Emily's infidelity but had also made a mockery of our once private pain. That night, I returned home to an atmosphere heavy with tension. The silence in our living room was deafening, filled with the unspoken words that neither of us knew how to begin. Emily's eyes, usually warm and inviting, were now guarded and distant. It was as if the digital revelation had drawn an impenetrable barrier between us. We sat in the dim light, the only sound the soft hum of the refrigerator, each of us lost in our thoughts. The reality was stark. My impulsive act had irreversibly altered the course of our lives. In that quiet, oppressive moment, I understood that the viral post had unleashed a torrent of consequences. The digital realm, with all its immediacy and reach, had taken away our ability to control the narrative. I had traded our private pain for a public spectacle, and in doing so, had set in motion events that neither time nor remorse could easily undo. As I gazed into the distance, I realized that the true fallout was only beginning, and that the coming days would force us to confront not only the betrayal but also the harsh reality of living in a world where nothing remains private for long. The days following that fateful evening were a blur of strained silences, painful confrontations, and sleepless nights. Every tick of the clock served as a reminder that the fallout from my impulsive post was far from over. Our home, once a sanctuary of mutual trust and love, now felt like a battleground where every shared glance and half-spoken word carried the weight of betrayal. That night, after the terse text from Emily, we sat down in our living room, a space that had witnessed countless happy memories and, now, seemed to echo with the ghosts of our shattered trust. The conversation that ensued was raw and unfiltered, a cathartic venting of long-suppressed emotions. Emily's voice, usually soft and melodious, trembled with a mix of anger and hurt as she recounted her side of the story. She admitted that the late nights and hushed phone calls weren't all innocent. There had been a connection with someone at work, a coworker who offered her attention and validation when I, it seemed, had grown complacent. I listened, my heart sinking with every word. The revelation was devastating, but it wasn't entirely unexpected. Still, the public nature of my outburst had robbed us of a private space to mend our wounds. Instead of a gentle, mutual confrontation, our pain was now on full display, a performance for a global audience. As she spoke, I could see the flicker of disbelief and shame cross her face, a silent acknowledgement of the irreversible breach between us. Her admission, however, wasn't the only truth that surfaced that night. In the midst of the heated conversation, Emily's eyes welled up with tears as she confessed that she had felt trapped in our routine, suffocated by the predictable rhythm of our married life. The coworker had been an escape, a way to recapture a sense of excitement and validation that she felt was missing. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered between sobs, "but I needed something different, something that made me feel alive." Her words, though steeped in sorrow, cut deeper than any accusation. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the acknowledgement that our relationship had been slowly dying, long before the digital confession had exposed it to the world. As the conversation unfolded, the gravity of our situation became all too clear. We were no longer just two individuals dealing with a personal crisis. We had become unwilling actors in a drama that was unfolding in real time before an audience of strangers. Every word exchanged, every tear shed, was another piece of our private life that had been laid bare. The public humiliation was compounded by the profound personal loss that neither of us had anticipated. Our shared history, our dreams, and our future were now obscured by the stark reality of our fractured trust. Outside, the world continued unabated, a stark contrast to the intimate chaos within our home. I could hear the distant hum of traffic and the occasional bark of a neighbor's dog, a reminder that life, in its indifferent persistence, moved on regardless of personal suffering. Meanwhile, I was left grappling with a heavy truth. My desire for validation had inadvertently catalyzed the very breakdown I'd been trying to expose. The irony was not lost on me, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the digital confession had become a double-edged sword. In the midst of this emotional maelstrom, a part of me wondered if there was any salvageable beauty in the aftermath of such a public unraveling. Had our relationship, marred by betrayal and exacerbated by social media's unforgiving spotlight, reached a point of no return? Or was there, hidden beneath the layers of hurt and regret, a possibility for redemption, a chance to rebuild on a foundation that had been brutally shattered? The answer remained elusive as the night wore on. In the silence that followed our heart-wrenching conversation, I realized that the reckoning we were facing was more than just a personal reckoning. It was a confrontation with the complexities of modern love and the inescapable consequences of sharing our deepest pain online. As I sat there, grappling with the implications of every word, I knew that the coming days would demand a level of honesty and vulnerability that I wasn't sure I possessed. In the days that followed our raw confrontation, the weight of our public and personal debacle pressed down on us in ways we never could have anticipated. The immediate storm of emotions slowly gave way to a grim routine of awkward glances, hushed conversations, and an ever-present digital buzz reminding us of the viral post that had upended our lives. Every new comment on social media, every whispered remark at work, seemed to echo the pain of that fateful night. Emily and I, both caught in the crossfire of our private agony and the public spectacle it had become, made the difficult decision to seek help. We began attending couples therapy, not with the expectation of a miracle cure but in the hope of finding some clarity amid the chaos. In the sterile, softly lit room of our therapist's office, we started peeling back the layers of resentment, hurt, and unmet expectations that had built up over the years. It wasn't a quick fix. There were days when the past would rear its ugly head and remind us of every mistake, every moment of betrayal. But slowly, the therapy sessions became a space where we could speak honestly without fear of judgment, a place where our voices could be heard beyond the glare of online scrutiny. During one particularly revealing session, Emily spoke of the loneliness she had felt long before the affair. "I felt invisible in our marriage," she admitted, her voice cracking with vulnerability. "I needed someone to notice me, to make me feel desired, even if it was just for a moment." Her confession was a painful acknowledgement of how both of us had, in our own ways, contributed to the distance that eventually paved the way for the betrayal. I, too, recognized that I had grown complacent, wrapped up in my own world of silent suffering, rather than actively nurturing our relationship. That realization stung, but it was also the first step toward a painful kind of healing. Back in the digital realm, the frenzy over my post gradually subsided. The initial rush of validation from strangers, the outpouring of support, and the salacious commentary from Emily's coworkers, all began to fade into the background noise of the internet. Yet, the damage had already been done. I learned that even the most fleeting online moment could leave an indelible mark on real life. The post had not only altered the course of our marriage but had also exposed the fragility of privacy in a hyper-connected world. One afternoon, after a long and arduous journey through therapy and personal reflection, Emily and I sat down together to have a frank discussion about our future. There were no grand declarations or promises of instant reconciliation, only a mutual recognition of the need to rebuild, brick by brick, what had been shattered. We decided that, regardless of whether our marriage could be fully restored, we owed it to ourselves to try. The healing process would be gradual, filled with setbacks and moments of doubt, but it was also a chance to redefine our relationship on new, more honest terms. We also agreed to address the digital scars that had marred our lives. I took down the original post, a symbolic gesture of reclaiming our privacy and taking responsibility for my actions. While the internet had a long memory, removing the post was an important step in our journey toward forgiveness and recovery. I posted a follow-up message, not as a grand apology or a plea for sympathy, but as a quiet acknowledgement of the lessons learned, the importance of honesty, of communication, and of protecting the intimate parts of our lives from the relentless glare of public opinion. In the end, the aftermath of that viral post was a crucible that forced us to confront our deepest fears and shortcomings. It was a painful, messy process that left us scarred, yet, in its own paradoxical way, it also offered a glimmer of hope, a chance to rebuild and, perhaps, to find a new form of connection born out of raw honesty and shared pain. We had no guarantees for the future, and the road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, there was a spark of possibility amid the ruins. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the memory of that post slowly receded from the forefront of our lives. Yet, the lessons it imparted lingered, an enduring reminder that in our modern age, where every personal moment can become a public spectacle, true healing begins only when we dare to reclaim our own narrative and rebuild what truly matters, one honest conversation at a time.